This is my intro music. Welcome to the video. I hope you like it lots, so don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. Now let's react.
Hey, hi, hello then. Welcome to an episode of An Anthropologist. It's about fat acceptance and health at every size. Because that's what I'm going to do. We're going to watch a video by Mutt Fitness. This was put out 4 days ago. Today is March the 15th. And this is called Science versus Fat Activists, Fatlogic. And we're not watching the whole video. There's like 2 major sections of this video that I really wanted to talk about. And trust me, that'll take plenty of time. It'll take lots of time. So fat acceptance and health at every size are 2 modern social movements that are basically claiming that morbid obesity is just as healthy as a person of a healthy average weight. They are wrong, but they're also, you might have heard about, I mean, if you're not following it already, I don't know why you'd be watching this if you weren't, but fat acceptance has also been under fire recently, mostly on TikTok and here on YouTube that I have seen, for being called a cult. And people in fat acceptance are taking umbrage with it because they're not a cult. And people who have left fat acceptance are like, oh yeah, no, you're totally a cult. So here's my thing with labeling them as a cult. The classification of something as being a cult is like real and serious thing. And it's like diagnosing people with various mental problems. We, the lay public, should not be doing that. It's one thing for us to just kind of like jokingly say it. It's another thing to like, the nuance of being able to classify something takes familiarity with that classification and with things like actual cults. So where it's fun to say things like fat acceptance is a cult or fat acceptance looks cult-like to me, that's one thing. But to put your foot down and be like, fat acceptance is a cult, I don't think any of us are actually qualified to make that call. However, people who are leaving fat acceptance are comparing it to a cult, and I'm not going to say that their lived experience isn't valid because maybe while they were in there, they did feel like they were in a cult. And there are a lot of things that fat acceptance and health at every size does that really does make people go, So though it may sound like I'm trying to defend them, I'm really not. I'm saying that people's experiences with fat acceptance and HAES feels cult-like to them. I don't know if the government or whoever it is that classifies things officially as cults would come down and say fat acceptance and HAES is a cult. It would be really interesting if they did. But I also don't think that fat acceptance and HAES is on their radar. So I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I do know people who have had interactions with fat acceptance and health at every size who have left those movements. They are considered movements. Who have left those movements, kind of most of them do say, it felt like I was in a cult. Leaving felt like a cult. They seem to be a cult. Those are their personal experiences, so we're going to run with it. And the reason, and this particular clip out of Mutt Fitness's video, it's up on the screen. This is kind of why. This whole exchange that we're about to go over, spoilers, is someone coming on to a health at every size chat area and is saying, my doctor has diagnosed me with a lethally high blood pressure and has given me a diet that I'm going to go on because I don't want to. However, I would like to continue to be part of this group. And then the group proceeds to tell this individual to ignore their doctor because what is their doctor now? Blood pressure doesn't have anything to do with obesity, and it has everything to do with genetics and stress. So you should just go crawl in a hole and pull the dirt in over you because we're not going to bury you. And people are like, why do they think we're a cult? Oh, you just literally told one of your people to go rather than lose weight. That was the response you gave this person. Not, oh my God, that's scary. Hey, do you need moral support during this time? Gee, I hope you get healthy because I don't want you to. No. Just ignore your doctor and take one for the team. All right, anyway, let's get into this.
Blood pressure to ignore her doctor. My blood pressure is dangerously high. Doctor said I could have a stroke at any time. His nurse gave me a free living will kit. I have to go on a very strict diet so I don't die. Bye-bye intuitive eating. I'll stay in the group though, if you guys allow me to.
There is a lot happening right here. First off, the person says, my blood pressure is dangerously high. Later on, they'll tell us how high it was. The doctor said I could have a stroke at any time. That's terrifying. His nurse gave the patient a living will kit so that they can get their medical affairs in order in case they're in a condition where they can't verbally say what they want their medical treatment to do. A living will, because I've had experiences with these, a living will is how a patient communicates after they are unable to respond to things. So it's things like DNRs and that kind of shit. It's scary, okay? This is a scary thing to be handed. And then the person says that I've been put on a very strict diet, so I don't. And it's counter to intuitive eating, which intuitive eating is like the thing that fat acceptance and health at every size likes to say is the only way you should be eating, because if your body's craving a cupcake, then you should eat the cupcake because your body knows what it needs. Your body does not need sugar. It does not need white refined sugar. All right? It doesn't need uber processed, hyper processed foods. It doesn't need cakes and cookies and donuts and icing and sprinkles and ice cream and any other garbage food that you know is garbage, but you're going to be like, don't moralize food. I will moralize food. You know, and I know that your body doesn't need those things. All right. But they like to call it intuitive eating because it gives them an excuse to eat that stuff. And then they don't have to feel bad about it, even though I'm pretty sure they feel bad about it. Personal opinion. This person then goes on to say, I will stay in the group, though, if you guys allow me to. So this person is turning to this group as some kind of, like, support kind of a group. Like, they're explaining to this group of people on the internet that they're having a very scary medical problem. So I'm assuming they're looking for some kind of sympathy or support or just, like, friendship rallying around them in this very frightening time. But they're also acknowledging that there's a possibility that they're going to get kicked out because they're no longer following the rules of the group by eating intuitively and by purposefully, intentionally losing weight. So they know that they're about to get ostracized from their social group because they can no longer live up to the I want to say morals, but that's not the word I'm looking for. The requirements of that social group. So how real are the friendships that you've made here that you're currently concerned about losing them, even though this seems to be the only group you can turn to as a friend group? But they're not a cult.
Someone replies, diets don't fix high blood pressure. Stress and genetics are the main factors, and dieting will only lead to more stress and won't address genetics if it's dangerously high.
How do you address genetics? Like, let's pretend for a minute that blood pressure doesn't have anything to do with diet and weight, and let's pretend like it is only stress and genetics. So what is your definition of stress? Because there's various forms of stress, and some of them are more detrimental to health than others, but stress is a sneaky, sneaky bastard. So stress can do a lot. But like, what do you mean it won't address genetics? What treatment? What? Are we going to mutate your high blood pressure gene or something? Is there gene therapy for high blood pressure? Maybe there is, and I don't know, but that doesn't sound right.
The only thing that can really be done is to take medication and work on reducing stress.
So, random person on the internet says, don't listen to your doctor, listen to me. Just ask for some magical pills and meditate. Cool. I'm sure that's going to save my life. What is it with fat acceptance and Haze and their dependence on medication? There's nothing wrong with taking medication, but this person has been given a non-medication way of improving their life and reducing their risk of mortality. And fat acceptance is like, nah, man, give me a pill. I would rather swallow a handful of pills every day than just reduce the amount of garbage that I eat and take a walk. It's just easier to swallow a giant handful of pills along with my numerous Cokes throughout the day than it is to walk around the block and cut out sugar.
So is that true? Here's a systematic review and meta-analysis of various experiments about dietary patterns and blood pressure in adults.
This is Dietary Patterns and Blood Pressure in Adults, a systematic review and meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So the meta-analysis is when they look at older studies that are the actual experiments, and they kind of try to like condense everything down and compare and contrast various things to each other. So they're trying to get basically all the data in one place and just kind of go through what everybody found and how those relate back to each other. It's like the end product of all of the studies that we do. And it's important. It's very important, because otherwise you just have all these random studies floating around and nobody knows like that this study over here has discovered that something that this study down here needs to know about that will affect the results of this study. So meta-analyses are very important.
They found that when someone follows the DASH diet, or the Nordic diet, or the Mediterranean diet.
So the DASH diet is the Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension diet. I've never been on it. I don't have that problem. So if you have been on it, let me know. Nordic diet, I looked up. It seems to be based on the Scandinavian food pyramid, which is better than the American food pyramid. And I think most people know what the Mediterranean diet is by now.
They significantly lowered their systolic and diastolic blood pressure by about 4 and 2, respectively. These diets are rich in fruit, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, seeds, nuts, fish, and dairy, and low in meat, sweets, and alcohol.
I must be too.
Lifestyle factors such as exercise and weight loss in combination with dietary changes may also reduce blood pressure. So, we found that that was indeed a lie. Diet alone can improve your blood pressure. Is reducing your systolic blood pressure by about 5 millimeters of mercury significant? According to this study here, it is. They found that a 5 millimeter of mercury reduction in your systolic blood
I did not know that MMHG meant 5 millimeters of mercury.
pressure reduced your risk of major cardiovascular events by about 10%. That is a big deal. You're probably asking, what about medications? This meta-analysis looked at the long-term blood pressure reduction you can get from antihypertensive drugs. It looks like that with medication, you can reduce your blood pressure by about 10 or 11, if I'm understanding this study right.
So, but the study also found that the longer you're on the medication, the less effective it becomes. I think it says that here in a minute.
So diet alone is half as effective as medication. For people with extremely high blood pressure, let's say 200, it seems to me that medication won't be enough, and diet won't be enough.
So this is the same study. So this study found that up to 4 years on average, medication works for reducing your blood pressure. However, after that point, there's diminishing returns, basically. So I don't know what happens after 4 years. Do they put you on a different medication or what? But the one that seems to be like the one that sticks is changing lifestyle. And that requires a change in diet and exercise.
So your doctor at that point is going to be doing everything they can to reduce your blood pressure, including more extreme things such as I've not even thought of.
I don't even know what you would do besides diet, exercise, and medication. Like, is there a surgery you can do? Like, I don't even know what else you could possibly do.
Anyway, to keep going on about how diet doesn't matter.
Here we go.
Someone writes, we will have to
We're back to the original conversation here.
disagree on that one. Once the fear of dying goes away, my overwhelming cravings due to decades of dieting will come back.
If you've been dieting for decades, then I would assume you're on a semi-successful diet. So what cravings have you been carrying with you for 20 or more years that at year 30, you're just like, fuck it? What does that even mean? And the fear of dying isn't enough? Like, I don't understand that. The fear of death is not enough to motivate you indefinitely? Okay.
It's not a matter of agree to disagree, it's a proven fact. Doctors use food and weight as a scapegoat. It just wastes time putting people on diets when what they really need is medicine.
Because doctors know that in the long run, lowering your weight and improving your diet will have a longer and more positive effect on you than giving you pills that will only work for about 4 years. It's like when people get weight loss surgery or people see other people get weight loss surgery and they're like, oh, they start gaining all the weight back. Yeah. I think every time I've watched 600 Pound Life, Dr. Now has explained that the weight loss will plateau. It's only good for about a year, year and a half. So the goal is to lose as much weight as you can during that time and change your lifestyle so that when you plateau, you don't start going back up the other direction, going back up the way you were. Like, what part of this do people not get? Medical intervention, though necessary, and there's nothing wrong with getting it, is temporary. Diet and lifestyle change is permanent.
I just showed that's not true. Diets work. Someone else. Oh, you can really see the stranglehold that diet culture anti-fatness has on us when it comes to issues of personal health. I understand how scary it can be to find out that your health is in a place where it could become life-threatening, but having a knee-jerk reaction that takes you back into dangerous territory like disordered eating and weight cycling is not the answer.
I understand how scary it can be to find out that your health is in a place where it could become life-threatening. No, they were given a living will kit. That's not a could. That's not a could. That's a when. When your heart stops, do you want us to try to restart it or just let you go? That's the living will. But what does your doctor know? What does your doctor, who spent probably around an actual decade of training, what do they know?
A strict diet or weight loss absolutely will not cure hypertension. In fact, those things are likely to have a more detrimental long-term effect than addressing this from an HAES perspective.
What does health at every size, what could health at every size possibly offer to treat and or cure hypertension that weight loss and diet and exercise cannot? You can't just wish yourself healthy. Okay? The donut is not going to magically make your blood pressure drop. Okay?
I just proved that's not true. So, yeah.
Oops.
It's true that we don't talk about Principle 10 a ton in this group,
I don't know what Principle 10.
because this usually leads us down the path of thinking about food in terms of virtue and superiority. What often gets left out of the conversation is how many facets of health there are, and how those don't all come down to the macro and micronutrients.
What? How many facets of health there are? What does that mean? And how those facets of health don't come down to the macro and micronutrients? What do you think food is made of? Air?
It also leads us to a place of hyper-focusing on food, and not talking about all the other things that contribute positively and negatively to our well-being. If you die of a heart attack, all of your other sources of well-being are gone. First of all, there are many sources of oppression that make health inaccessible. There are also
What does that have to do with this person's high blood pressure?
disabilities and illness that make health inaccessible.
Also, quit using disabled and chronically ill people as some kind of like battle flag. Y'all are fat because you ate yourself that way. Disabled and chronically ill people have a different set of parameters that they have to navigate.
Outside of those, there's weight stigma,
Sorry, that shit makes me mad.
access issues, stress, OMG, the stress.
I can't figure out if they're like, oh my God, there's so much stress, or if they're like, oh my God, this stress, like making fun of it. I can't tell.
Sleep, movement, pollution, and on and on.
What pollution makes you 300 pounds or more?
I think many of us cling to food because it feels like something we can control. But
It is. It's like one of the few things you can control in life.
controlling your intake doesn't improve your cardiovascular
Hence why things like Anna and bulimia are issues.
health. Someone else, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but as Grace has stated, this isn't about diet. People of all shapes, sizes, and diets get high blood pressure. Did they give you medication? That is really the only long-term solution.
Did they give you a magical pill? Because God forbid you do anything else other than swallow a bunch of pills every day. Look, if you have to take medication every day, that's fine. I do. Okay? That's fine. But this is ridiculous. You've been given a solution that isn't a magic pill, that isn't medication. and you're like, nah, I'd rather swallow a pill than adjust my diet and exercise. But I could solve your problem permanently. Yeah. I'd rather just swallow pills, though. Okay.
There are definitely things
These are the same people that bitch about doctors being nothing but like charlatans and pill pushers. All you're asking them for are pills, and you won't listen to anything else they have to say. Why do you even go to doctors?
you can do, such as getting more joyful movement in, reducing stress, and getting more sleep, but cutting out food groups and such won't help.
Sugar is not a food group.
Blood pressure is more genetics and stress. Honestly, I would argue that going on a strict diet will make it worse long term because it will add stress to your body.
What do you people think stress is? There's like mental stress and there's physical stress. I'm sure there's other types of stress. The two that I'm aware of are those two. Like what do you guys think stress is? Do you think you walk into a room and you just go and suddenly there's no more stress? Like you don't think about the 600 pounds of force that you put on your knees every time you take a step because you're way overweight, or the amount of stress that you put on your heart and your other organs because you're strangling it with visceral fat, or the stress that you put on your actual physical brain itself because you're not eating the right kinds of food to allow it to work properly. Like, do you not think of that as stress? Is that not stress? Is the only thing stress is something where you've got to like squeeze a squeezy ball? That's the only kind of stress? Because that's what it sounds like.
I've already proven that's not true. What's their proof? Yeah, they did. My blood pressure was 220 over. Oh my god.
I didn't even know blood pressure could go that high.
This person has an extremely high blood pressure.
What is a blood pressure? Understanding blood pressure readings. So last time I got my blood pressure taken, it was like in the green. Usually they're like, "Are you even alive?" And I'm like, "I guess." Yeah, mine was like 120 over 80. This person's blood pressure is literally off the chart. This person's blood pressure is off the chart. Hypertensive crisis. Consult your doctor immediately. I mean, we don't know what the lower number was because they say they don't remember, so hopefully it was less than 120? If your blood pressure readings suddenly exceed 180 to 120, wait 5 minutes and then test your blood pressure again. If your readings are still unusually high, contact your healthcare professional immediately. You could be experiencing a crisis, and you are experiencing signs of possible organ damage such as chest pain, shortness of breath, so a heart attack. Call 911. I think I made it into elevated one time that they took my blood pressure in my entire life. I've been very fortunate. I'm not going to lie. I think of one time I was higher than 120. I don't remember where it was, but they weren't that concerned. They were just like, "Oh, your blood pressure's high. What does that mean?" And they're like, "Don't worry about it. It's just, this is slightly elevated." I'm like, "Am I going to die?" And they're like, "No, you're fine." Don't lie to me, doctor. Give it to me straight. Anyway, I am one of those people.
They could keel over at any moment.
Literally, their blood pressure is off the chart.
They ought to be doing anything and everything their
The chart I found.
doctor says. They continue. I don't even remember the bottom number. I didn't even know that 220 was dangerously high until they told me. I've always had normal blood pressure, so I never bothered to remember the numbers until last week.
So if that were true, you've always had blood pressure that's around 120 over 80-ish. Until last week, when they tell you that your blood pressure is literally off the chart, and you're not more concerned? If I went to the doctor today and got my blood pressure taken and it was at this level, I would be going to the emergency room. Or, I mean, I would be at the doctor. I would be like, "Fix it now?" I've never had blood pressure this high. And this person is claiming that their blood pressure is where my blood pressure usually is. And last week for them, it jumped to 220 over something. And I mean, this person's rightfully scared. I mean, they sound like they're actually like, "Oh shit." But everyone else around them is like, whatever. What do doctors know? It's just stress. It's just genetics. There's nothing you can do about it. Why are you worried? But I don't want to die. Also, my blood pressure hasn't always been this high. Clearly something has changed. No, it's genetics. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, genetically, I've always had normal blood pressure up until last week. So what happened in your world to make my blood pressure go up? Oh, well, that's the stress. Oh, I just need to like meditate and sniff some incense and it'll go back down. Yeah. That's what Hayes tells us.
Another thing fat activists like saying that there's no link between the two things, like it's just correlation and not causation. But I found a study, Effective Weight Loss and Blood Pressure Changes in Overweight Patients, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis, which shows how the two things are connected. That is exactly how obesity and blood pressure are related.
So the important thing here is that obesity is at the top and arterial hypertension is at the bottom here. I can't make this go away for some reason. I can't see this very well. Maybe you can zoom, so I know you can't see it. But it's basically obesity. There's two other little arms here, but the main chunk here is in the center. This is visceral adipose tissue. It goes down to insulin resistance and inflammation and sympathetic nervous system activation. This one is leptin resistance and adiposity, I think. Anyway, fat. So basically what it's saying is the more obese you are, your fat, your leptin resistance, your insulin resistance, and chronic inflammation, and then something in the sympathetic nervous system. I'm guessing that's stress. These things immediately go down to hypertension. The inflammation and leptin resistance goes into local inflammation and increased arterial stiffness. And I can't read that one, honestly. But those also go down and contribute to arterial hypertension. So basically, there's a straight line here between fat, insulin resistance and inflammation, and arterial hypertension. Fat, I'm guessing stress, and hypertension. Fat, more fat, leptin resistance, inflammation, and the stiffening of your arteries, and arterial hypertension. It's basically a direct link, is what I'm saying. I don't know what FFA release is. I don't know what that is. I'm not a medical doctor. But I can read a flow chart.
I considered going through this diagram point by point, but then I realized I didn't know what many of the words meant. This diagram's clearly only meant for doctors, but if you're interested in exactly how obesity and arterial hypertension are related, this study might be a good place to start.
All right. I want to jump to another part here. This one I want to talk about because the fat acceptance and Hayes is always going on about how the BMI is racist and this and that and something else. And I want to talk about it some because it's not. Also, the arguments the arguments about why the BMI is bad, those arguments are also ill-informed and bad. And they should feel bad. Anyway.
Solon Avalanche brings us.
This says, BMI debunked by, check notes, adjustable pliers?
My son's health teacher was just talking about BMI, and my son was like, it's racist and not a measure of health. It was created by insurance companies and there's no real medical purpose. And my teacher was gagged. Man was literally silent for at least a minute. Ha ha ha.
How do you know? Like, were you in the room when your kid did that? And if you were, why were you at your kid's health class? Like, why were you there? I don't understand. Is it one of those situations where like I know some schools will have the parents come in and basically be like the teacher's aide for the day. So I guess in that aspect it makes sense, but like any other reason, I don't understand why you were there. Anyway.
An MD replies, BMI isn't perfect, but as a fast general reference for underweight, normal, overweight, and obese, it's extremely useful. It has nothing to do with race, though. I recently learned it was designed by a mathematician nearly 200 years ago who was trying to identify groupings of people.
Well, you're wrong in the first sentence.
It wasn't designed to diagnose obesity.
And I don't know what the rest of this is about. They're going on to talk about, I think they're talking about a women's university rowing team that were also classified as obese, but it's pretty well known by people who aren't being jerks about it that the BMI doesn't work on athletes or bodybuilders. And again, as the doctor points out, it's like 1% of the population that this person clearly doesn't belong to.
Moment in the early aughts when an entire woman's
I don't know, maybe they do. Maybe they are a bodybuilder.
university rowing team, blah blah blah. MD, as has been said many times, BMI's inaccuracy with serious athletes is its biggest flaw, but you're talking about 1% of the population.
Yeah, it's pretty well known that the BMI does not work when you get into athletes, because the BMI doesn't distinguish between muscle weight and, well, it doesn't distinguish between what's causing the weight. It's just your weight and your height. And in the majority of the population, 99% of the population, that correlation tells you how fat a person is. So, did they go on? I can't remember exactly.
And humorously enough, BMI's other major problem is that the categories are slightly wrong and that most people are actually fatter than the BMI categories say, because the statistics are based upon people from about 30 or 40 years ago, and people have gotten much fatter and less muscular over time.
Yeah, so talking about the BMI doesn't differentiate between like muscle weight and fat weight, because the general population is morbidly obese or just very obese. That's more fat and less muscle. So I guess this DEXA assessment, I don't know what it is, but let's look it up. You have the internet. Oh, so the DEXA scan is a bone density test that gauges your risk of osteoporosis. It can also measure body composition, such as fat and muscle mass. Okay, so it's a scan that is there to help you know if you're going to have bone loss. It's for your bones. But because it goes as deep as your bones, it can also be used to measure your body composition and fat and muscle. So the DEXA, differentiates between fat mass and muscle mass. The BMI, being a simple mathematic formula, does not do that. It just takes your weight and your height. The DXA is an actual medical procedure, which is just a scan. There's nothing fancy. There's nothing painful about it. But it can differentiate between fat and muscle. All right. So they can literally measure how much fat you have. And people who underwent both a DXA and a BMI, which is not hard to do, the BMI is classifying people less reliably as obese than the DEXA is. So basically you're more obese than you think you are. Thanks. That's what I needed today.
So, Doc, you admit that BMI as a tool is problematic, but you won't go so far as to tell the whole truth, which is BMI was not developed by any medical professional to diagnose obesity. Why?
All right. Oh wait,
MD,
I think there is
not
more.
sure what you're trying to get at, but BMI remains the most common tool to diagnose obesity despite its limitations. What am I getting at? I thought it said what I said. It wasn't designed by medical people to be a tool to diagnose obesity. It wasn't designed by medical people at all. That's simple truth, full stop. Why is it you don't want to acknowledge that?
Oh yeah. Before we go into this stupid example, if you go online and Google it, you will find all kinds of resources telling you why the BMI is racist and why it's awful and it's horrible and it's the worst thing that's ever happened because it's racist. Did I mention it was racist? Okay, so here's the deal. So the BMI was created, so the BMI was created in 1972 by Ansel Keys. Ansel Keys also being the same person who did the Minnesota Starvation Project, which the fat acceptance and HAES communities like to use as an example as why losing weight is so terrible. Like the starvation is any kind of weight loss is starvation because the Minnesota Starvation Project. I did a video on that, and I might link it down below. But it basically proves. Dogs outside. It basically goes over what the Minnesota Starvation Project actually was, and it has nothing to do with dieting at all. Bupkis. All right. Ansel Keys, the same guy who spearheaded that study, took a body mass index. It's not even a body mass index. Took an index from the 1830s that was created by a Belgian. Was he even a mathematician? His name was like Lambert Adolphe Jacques Quillet, something like that, something French. He was Belgian. He was a mathematician. He was also an astronomer and a sociologist and something else I forget. From the 1830s, so Victorian times. And he was on a mission to find the average man, aka the perfect man. You know, the statistically perfect individual. And the reason he was looking for the statistically perfect individual was because any variation, these are his own words, any deviance from that would be an indicator of health. No, how did he put it? Everything differing from his proportion or condition, this is the average man, would constitute deformity or disease or monstrosity. That sounds very much like the 1800s. I'm not gonna lie. It was the 1800s. I don't really know what you want. But this deformity or disease, monstrosity, we're not going to get into. Deformity or disease would indicate that the Belgian mathematician was looking at health. He wanted to know what the perfect average man looked like, because anything other than that would be an indicator of health and well-being. So it was originally a formula used to determine health. Huh. And this quote I got out of a Good Housekeeping article that was quoting Fearing the Black Body. So I'm assuming this quote came out of Fearing the Black Body. So using this weird idea that this 1830s formula had nothing to do with determining health is wrong by your own citation. Good job, Fat Acceptance / Hayes. So, going off of that, in 1972, Ansel Keys decided that he wanted some kind of index as well. And so Ansel Keys took data that he already had and I guess incorporated the Belgian mathematician's QI, which it's his name index. I can't pronounce his name. I'm very sorry. I'm not that good. Anyway, so he took the QI and added to it and manipulated it and created what we now recognize as the BMI. So Ansel Keys in the 70s, 1972, 50 some odd years ago, created the BMI. So the BMI is not 200 years old. We're not still using the Belgian mathematician's formula. Ansel Keys used it and modified it and changed it and created the BMI. So we are now using the BMI. This is all according to the literature that Fat Acceptance and Hayes has out there. This is research from that, by the way. I'm using their own words. If we spend a moment on the wiki, the modern term body mass index for the ratio of human body weight to squared height was coined in a paper published on July 1972 in the July 1972 edition of the Journal of Chronic Disease by Ansel Keys et al. In this paper, Keys argued that what he termed the BMI was, if not fully satisfactory, at least as good as any other relative weight index as an indicator of relative obesity. So the next argument made by this person was that the BMI was never meant to indicate obesity, specifically obesity. In Ansel Keys' own words, in the paper that he published in 1972, where he coins the term body mass index, it was clearly made to determine obesity. So the BMI, again, created in 1972 by Ansel Keys, the great devil, that index has always been an indicator for obesity. Ansel Keys is a doctor. He was a medical researcher. Ansel Keys headed up the Minnesota Starvation Project. Ansel Keys did a couple other things in his lifetime, too. He's kind of famous. So this argument that fat acceptance and Hayes has that the BMI is racist was not created by medical people for health purposes is abjectly and provably wrong. The BMI, as we understand it today, was created in 1972 by Ansel Keys specifically to find obesity in patients. The racist part of this that they like to dig at, Ansel Keys and the Belgian guy both, who is kind of irrelevant at this point, by the way, they only used, Ansel only used white men, and I'm not even positive they were all white. He only used men from Europe and America because he had access to the military at that point. So yes, the original initial BMI, as was published by Ansel Keys in 1972, was predominantly using measurements taken from men. And I would not be terribly surprised if they were all Caucasian. Would not surprise me at all. Okay? So yes, the original BMI was very skewed towards men. But be a woman in the healthcare system for more than, 30 years, everything in the medical system is done on men first and then on women. It's changed a lot in my lifetime, all 40 some odd years of it. But up until this point, and I would argue in the last 10, maybe 20 years of it, all of the medical data that we have that we use to diagnose and treat women and people of color has all come from research that was predominantly done on white men. So my point is, yeah, it's not exactly racist because they were like, we don't like other people. We're only going to look at white people. It's that way because that's literally how medical science and science was done. And it's taken a lot of social movements and a lot of activism to get things to the point where we're having studies and trials done on people who aren't white men to treat people who aren't white men. Nothing against white guys. It's just the way it was, okay? So I guess you can say it's racist in that aspect, but that's judging the past by modern standards, and you surely shouldn't do that. The past is a strange place. They did things differently there. I had to calm down there for a second. I was getting a little too heated, and I think I was screaming into the mic, and I apologize. So anyway, this whole concept of the BMI being outdated, being not even created by medical people, being not intended for detecting diagnosing obesity, and being the creation of a Belgian dude from the 1830s. These are all factually and provably incorrect. You literally just need to go to the Wikipedia page or, spend more than 5 minutes on Google. It's not hard to find this data. However, Fat Acceptance and Hayes are so determined that this tool of the medical world needs to be demonized because somehow if they removed the BMI from classifying health, if you took the BMI away, you would be left with things like hip to waist ratio or this DEXA, which are more accurate. Well, maybe not hip to ratio, but they are accurate as well to diagnose obesity. So if you took away the BMI and now we're just using the DEXA, now you're even more obese than you were before. And hip to waist ratio is also another mathematical formula that uses body measurements to determine if you're obese or not. So now instead of just, stepping on a scale and having somebody do a quick math equation based off of your height, now you have to stand in a doctor's office and be measured in front of a nurse, probably. So now you have an audience. How you like them apples? the reality of the situation is your hip to waist ratio is probably still going to classify you as obese, because mine sure does. And the DEXA is definitely going to classify you as obese because it can see how much actual fat you have on your body versus how much muscle and bone mass. So are those both racist as well? Because reasons? Neither of those, maybe a hip to waist ratio was created to determine obesity, but the DEXA wasn't. That was for bone density. So can we not use the DEXA? Because even though it can accurately tell me how much fat and muscle I have on my body, it was made to determine how thick my bones were and if I have osteoarthritis or osteoporosis. So can I not use that then? Can I only use hip to waist ratio? Because it's still going to tell me I'm obese. All right? This is the bullshit that they go through. These are the mental gymnastics that they go to. They're all fixated on the BMI because it's the most accurate and the quickest way to get a diagnosis. But there is no doctor on this planet that only uses BMI as a health determiner, because it's not. It's meant to be used in tandem, to the point where the AMA even came out and made a statement about that. Okay? So what is your problem with the BMI other than it continuously tells you you're obese and you don't want to be? I don't want to be obese either. That's why I'm working to get my BMI under the number on the scale, on the chart. Okay? As opposed to saying, no, throw the chart out. These are the same people that don't like scales, because weighing themselves shows them how much they actually weigh, and they don't like knowing how much they actually weigh because they don't feel fat. Well, that's cool, but you're still 300 pounds. And you're not whatever equivalent height you need to be for those 300 pounds to not be fat. So, and you're probably not the 1% of the population that is some form of an elite athlete. So chances are you're obese. You know, it's this kind of shit. Also, all of your arguments can be proven wrong. These talking points and these arguments that they use are factually, provably wrong. And this is why I have such a hard time with fat acceptance and haze. Let's wrap this one up here. They tell people that their doctors don't know what they're talking about. They tell people that it's too bad that your blood pressure is as high as it is. You may as well just go take one for the team, because we couldn't possibly admit that there's any kind of connection between obesity and blood pressure, even though there's verifiable evidence that there's a connection between obesity and blood pressure. And we're going to go after the BMI constantly, over and over and over again, because a lie repeated enough times becomes the truth. And that's scary, because that is true. See TikTok, go Google BMI. There are articles after articles after articles talking about how the BMI is racist, and every single one of them refers back to the 1830s and the Belgian mathematician. The BMI was created by Ansel Keys in the 1970s. In 1972, we have a publication date for the first time the term BMI was used. Ansel Keys, the person who made that term, says it is used for detecting obesity. Okay? I don't know why we need to harp on this Belgian dude from the 1830s, other than he might have been the one that inspired Ansel Keys to create his index. Let's also keep in mind, dude from the 1930s' index is not the only index that existed back in the 1930s. He is one of many. His apparently is just the most popular because it's the one that stuck with everybody, apparently. Okay? This is just like, it's ridiculous. The amount of willful ignorance that has to go into this stuff in order for these health at every size and fat acceptance arguments to make any kind of sense is ridiculous. You literally have to ignore entire chunks of history in order for these arguments to make anything close to logical sense. Okay. That was close to an hour. I think I'm done. I am going to link Mutt Fitnesses article. Oh, we still haven't finished this yet. I'm so sorry. I'll let them finish because this is stupid too.
For example, I occasionally use a pair of adjustable pliers to open small bottle tops because of the arthritis in my hands. I can still acknowledge that's not what they were designed to do.
Okay. But the pliers still open the bottle. So their argument is that the BMI wasn't designed to detect obesity, which I've already ranted about how that's not true. And so their example is they use pliers to open bottle tops because they can't get a grip on the bottle top, but pliers weren't created to open bottle tops. I mean, specifically a bottle top, right? But
Scalg replies, maybe I'm tripping, but pliers are used to grip things, so that is still the purpose. If you can't get the grip you need to open the thing, it gives you the grip you need.
so even though you're using a tool that was designed for, in your mind, something different, but you're using it for a specific purpose that in your mind it was not designed for, doesn't mean it doesn't work. So that same argument can be applied to the BMI if we pretend like we don't know what we do know about the BMI. Maybe it was created by the French Belgian dude, anyway, to, I don't know, detect the size of your ankles versus the size of your wrist. Why else would you make a health index? But anyhow, and we have been using it for 200 years, even though that's also demonstrably not true, for detecting obesity. It's still been shown to it still has been shown to detect obesity. So it's still a tool that can be used to detect obesity. Kind of like your pliers can still be used to open a bottle, even though they weren't designed for opening bottles. Your own argument disproves the other half of your freaking argument. Anyway, all right, now we're going to wrap up. So I will link Mutt Fitness's article down below in the description. I do recommend going and watching the whole thing. His stuff is always very fun. It's also enraging at times. So go check that out. Let him know I sent you. Or don't. I don't care. Be sure to, I don't know, be sure, if you go over there, be sure to like leave an emoji or a thumbs up or something. I don't know. Give him some love. If you've made it this far and you've somehow sat through all of my ravings and rantings and you're not clicking off and running for the hills, go ahead and leave your favorite springtime flower down in the comments section as your emoji and let me know what you guys think of the video. Thank you again to everybody who has been supporting the channel. It really rocks. This channel's over 42K at this point. And no, wait. Wow, I wish. It's over 4K at this point. Woo! That would be amazing, though. Thank you to all of my subscribers. You guys rock. Thank you to my members. You guys are rock stars. Thank you to everybody who's going to hit the thumbs up button because you're pretty cool, too. And I will see everybody in the next one. Bye!
This is my outro music. You can't copyright strike me because it's just me singing. This is my outro music. Thank you for watching. See you next time.